All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. My name is Jim Brooks. I'm the Director of Housing Development and Healthy Homes for the City of Worcester, and want to welcome you here to Worcester. I know a lot of you are from outside the city. Welcome, and thank you for taking the time today to learn a little bit about more about starting a shelter in your municipality. Today, we've heard from municipalities over the last few months, really one of the barriers to getting a temporary shelter, a winter shelter up and going is where to start, right? There's building regulations, there's operational considerations, there's different things in order to get a shelter up and running, properly permitted, making sure you have the right permits in place, insurances are in place. Of those operations, who should be um, so what we've done today is we've brought together a lot of the Worcester municipal staff as well as nonprofits who are partners with it, and also outside the city in a lot of cases. Kind of go through what's really involved with getting our inspectional service department as well as our fire department. We have some members of COC, Continuum of Care, as well as some actual operators who are in shelters every day and kind of can go into a lot more detail of operations, things to think about you might not necessarily think about every day. So with that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it over to Leah Bradley. Leah Bradley is the CEO of Central Mass Housing Alliance, and also they are what's called the Continuum of Care. So they're responsible for all of Worcester County's homeless and really keeping track of homeless through data and through other methods. So with that, I'll turn it over to Leah.
Thanks, Jim. So a lot of you know me and you know Ron. So many of you sit on either our North County or South County Housing and Homelessness Task Force. And one of the reasons this came up for folks as well is that there's, with the rise in homelessness, so we also do the point in time count. The point in time count this year will be on January 28th. I'm looking at my CEO for nods, so I have the right date. And that's when we actually do the count in each of the communities to see how many folks are experiencing homelessness and living outdoors. And over the last 3 years, we've really seen a rise in the number of folks who are in the smaller communities and not just in Worcester. And folks have reached out to us and said, well, what can we do about that? So this training today is really designed for a temporary emergency shelter where it's like a day or two on really cold nights. If folks are interested in something that's more long-term, you can reach out to myself, some of my colleagues here too, just to really figure out what does that look like, how does the funding work. But today's really designed mostly for a volunteer type of a shelter for overnights at usually a congregation. Inspectional services will get more into that. And so for today, what we're going to do, we're going to have inspectional services give some information about what needs to happen just around building codes and fire and things. Then we are going to have a physician here to talk about PPE, personal protective equipment, about what to think about with that. And then we have Brian from SMOC, who's going to talk about the operations of what you need to consider. And then also Brian from Elliott Community Human Services, who will talk about some of the interacting with the clients that are in the shelter. We're gonna be sending out a checklist to all of you afterwards. So if you signed up, we have your email address. If you didn't sign up for the training, if you want to, I don't know that we have a pad to write down that email, but just let one of us know that you would like the information. And then it's getting recorded. It will be on the city's website, and we will also be posting on the city's website the checklist and also the application that they're going to go over this morning. So I'm going to hand it over to Inspectional Services and let them introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Nick Antanovic. I'm the Commissioner of Inspectional Services.
I'm Dave Horn, Deputy Commissioner of Inspectional Services.
I'm not part of inspectional services, but I'll introduce myself too.
So our portion of this is to go through the different rules and regulations in order to set up the temporary shelters throughout your communities. There are different regulations throughout the building code. There have also been amendments that have been signed into law over the last several years that allow for different exemptions and different methods to set these up. When we are looking at this, it really comes down to what are you using this shelter for? Like I said, there are different levels. We have extended stay shelters where we might be setting this up for the entire winter, and we're trying to work through those regulations because we need to meet a higher standard with the length of time, down to we are going to get a negative 10 degrees for the next 48 hours. We need to set up something to get people out of the cold for 2 days. Those type of scenarios. The 48-hour scenario has a lower bar than the 120-day scenario. So what we're looking at is the different places. And when we're coming in and we are going to look at the 48-hour scenario first, since that is the easier one to stand up quickly from an inspectional standpoint and from a code standpoint. And then it's also, from what we are hearing, is the majority of what you are looking for the short-term help in order to get through certain spikes throughout our weather or other crises. When we are looking to set up, yes. Oh, sorry. When we are looking to set up an emergency shelter, first thing that we are looking for is just the condition of the building. Depending on the locations, the laws that were signed into place make it easier for these to be stood up in churches or other religious places. There are two reasons for that. One is that these are already A uses. When we say A uses underneath the building code, there is a minimum standard that these buildings need to meet already, with having annual inspections, making sure that their alarms are up to date, making sure that their fire extinguishers are up to date, depending on the building itself, if its sprinkler system is in there. So why we allow for easier avenues to get into A uses and religious uses is because we are already going into these places on an annual basis, so we have a better understanding of what the safety circumstances are. When we go in and we're looking at these, as I said, for the short term, there are many exemptions that are provided, because at the end of the day, we are trying to put people in a safer situation than where they would be outside. So when we are looking at certain exemptions for these short-term shelters, we do not need to meet the full aspect of plumbing fixtures. We do not need to meet the full aspect of the ADA code. We do not need to meet the full aspect of all of the safety devices for the short term. So those are items that you want to work with your inspection or your building official with to confirm that these inspections are taking place, to confirm that these spaces have already been brought up to the proper codes and we're working with them. That way, when this presents itself, again, it makes it easier for the building official and the other people involved to sign off and say, yes, we are able to let this happen. This is going to create a safer situation than leaving these people outside in the cold. Does anybody have any questions from that standpoint? One of the other items to do this, just because documentation is key for all of this, it's documentation to protect the building officials, it's documentation to work with to protect the town. It's documentation to protect the entity that is also offering up their space. What we do in order to make these legal and for the documents is we issue temporary COs for this type of use. What that does is that says that the building official has looked at this, the building official has confirmed that at this point in time, this building meets the safety needs for the situation that is present, and they are allowing this use to occur. And then typically there is a time frame placed on that, whether it be 3 months, whether it be a month, whether it be a week, whether it be a couple of days. Typically we allow it for a certain number of time because we also know that cold snaps and different weather happen throughout the course of the season. So to come in and say that we're going to have to check with the building official every time and get a new TCO. Makes it very onerous and is not efficient. So in the beginning of the year, when we are looking at these spaces, we will help set those up depending on the criteria they meet, whether they are good for the 24, 48-hour uses, or if they are able to have extended stays or additional occupancies in there. The other item that we do look at when we're coming in is the occupant loads for those spaces. This is another area where there are some exemptions. Again, at the end of the day, we are trying to create a safer situation for the individuals being affected, which means that some of our exemptions come into place for occupancy loads. So when we look at this, depending on what is being used, if we are offering cots or mats in sleeping situations, we want to make sure that we have proper spacing, but at the same time, it also does not necessarily mean that the occupancy load is what it is. So a good rule of thumb, if you are putting mats or cots down, is 24 square feet. That gives you 6 foot head to head and a 3 foot buffer to walk through, and then 1 foot for persons to have their individual belongings on the side for the spacing of the cots. So 24 square feet gives you a rough idea of the number of individuals you would be able to have in that spot. When we're looking through that, again, depending on the community you're in and how you want to do this, we have set up an application so that we are able to document the different places. We are able to have the information we're looking for as far as up-to-date safety services, who the responsible parties are, the number of people that are going to be there, and the different locations. Again, this is all the documentation that we're looking for. It is the CYA for us. It is the CYA for you. That is so that if anything does occur while we are helping people in this situation, we can say, no, we followed our due diligence and we put these presence and permissions in place in order to allow for this use to happen. Again, we cannot predict every scenario that is going to occur every amount of time, but in most cases, I would say 95% of the time, there will be no issues. The bigger issues you're going to have is dealing with the people themselves, not the building. So that's what we're looking at, is that when we're coming in, it's making and understanding the decision that when we open up these places, we are doing it to put people in a safer situation than where they would be out in the cold. Any questions at this point? Okay. As you can see, we passed around a copy of our form for our application. We actually are planning on getting this uploaded into our online permitting so that we have that moving forward. But again, for a lot of the communities that might not have the electronic permitting or are still developing this, it's a good base, and then you can tailor it to your own community and what your building official and your fire officials may be looking for. I'm going to ask Dave and Captain Bull to just speak on some of the more extensive needs in our larger shelters. Again, the 48-hour shelters are relatively easy to set up because the thresholds are shorter, and it really just comes down to documentation and supervision. It's the larger facilities where we're looking for a little bit more documentation and plans and stuff. So Dave, if you could.
Thank you. Captain and I do a lot of this. We're involved heavily in this, trying to figure out different places that are being proposed. I can't express it enough, I guess. The earlier, the better for Captain and I to do these types of site visits. Often the spaces, although they may look good to everybody at first glance, but in terms of fire protection systems, egress, overall safety, we often have issues with that. And as the commissioner was speaking to this, depending on the time frame we're setting a shelter up for long-term might impact what we're going to be looking for permanent devices within the fire alarm system. So it is very important that you try to reach out. We often ask ourselves, we'd like to look at these in the summertime, so we'd be prepared ahead of time. So if you need an electrician or you need some other work done in that building, that you've given ample time, because often we've found ourselves in a real pinch, and all of us have to basically clear our table and just do whatever it takes to get this shelter open. Jim has worked with different trades companies, electricians to be specific, how he's gotten some of these electricians within 24 hours to come in and add carbon monoxide detection to a building because it needs it. Remains to be seen, but if you have a person like Jim Brooks, maybe you can get that done. And I'll let Captain Bull elaborate a little bit on the fire protection systems for more specific details.
All right, yeah, so like the gentleman to my right said, time is, you want to be your friend. You don't want to wait until December to try and open these things up. You want to try and plan ahead, get these things planned out in the summertime, but it can be done last minute. We've experienced it a lot. So planning ahead, it pays dividends, but generally what we're looking for a shelter operation, especially a seasonal type shelter operation, preferably we got a building with sprinkler system. There are some exceptions in the building code, depending on the duration of the occupancy and so on and so forth. That might not be a hard requirement, but that's the first thing we're always looking for. Does this building that you're proposing to use have sprinklers? Does it have a fire alarm system? For a seasonal type facility, we're required to have smoke detectors, smoke detection, any place that you have people sleeping. That's a building code requirement. If there's any kind of fossil fuel burning equipment in the building, if you have generators, boilers, furnaces, gas-fired water heaters, anything that burns fossil fuels, or any indoor parking that's attached to whatever building you're looking at. You also need carbon monoxide detection in the building, specifically where the people are sleeping. One other fire alarm item that we notice is typically missing for a facility that is not typically used for sleeping is low frequency sounders on the fire alarm system. That is the type of a horn that scientifically has been developed to aid people in waking up if they're hard of hearing, if they're under the influence of some type of thing, which may be prevalent amongst your homeless or unsheltered populations. We also look at access to the building from the outside. A lot of times, these folks need a lot of services. They may need an ambulance. Is there a good way to get from where these people are being housed to a driveway, to a parking lot, to a street, to bring these people to an ambulance? Is the space handicapped accessible? Do they have a ramp or an elevator? If these people need to be taken out on a gurney or a wheelchair. That's one of the, in addition to that, access to the building in the event of a fire issue, carbon monoxide incident, some kind of a leak or anything like that. Can we get fire apparatus close to the building? Is there a fenced parking lot that they close the gate at night or something of that nature? We're going to be looking for that to be adjusted. A drawing needs to be provided to your building official and your fire official showing where the cots are being put, what the layout is, what the exit paths are being provided for these things. We check the exits, those back exits, whether it's a church or a gymnasium, maybe the front entrance looks great, it's functional, but you go to that back door that hasn't been opened in 10 years and it's jammed shut, it's rusted in place. You go down the back stairs and there's piles of janitorial equipment back there. Those are all things to be cognizant of. Emergency lighting. Has the emergency lighting been checked and inspected? Exit signs, if they're provided in the building, have they been checked and inspected? Your fire extinguishers, do you have enough fire extinguishers in this facility? And do they have a current inspection? Some facilities you might be looking at might have cooking facilities. Does that cooking facility have a suppression system integrated into it as it should? And has that been inspected and maintained in accordance with the code requirements? All things to consider. There's also a requirement for a landline telephone in an overnight shelter. We're not relying on this, which the shelter volunteers are watching TikTok for 6 hours, and then at 2 a.m. when they have an emergency, the battery's dead. A landline telephone is required, and it can be VoIP or internet protocol or whatever. It doesn't have to be copper lines from Marbell, but it does have to be a landline telephone. There has to be written notification provided to your fire official and your building official 48 hours before the shelter opens. There also has to be training for the staff, whether they're volunteers or employees, of what to do in a fire emergency, who to call, what are your contact numbers in case of an emergency. Dial 911 right off the bat, and then do you have building staff that you can call in? Whether if it's a church, is there a maintenance person there that they can call in case of an emergency? You got a broken pipe or something that occurs during the activation of the shelter. And there also have to be records of what the census is. How many people are in this building? If we need to evacuate, how do we account for the people that are in there? Do we have 5 people? Do we have 100 people? And we should also have the names of the staff, whether they're volunteers or employees. Those names should be written in a log. So if there is an emergency response, we know who those people are and how to get a hold of them. These are all required in the fire code, and these are things we check for that are provided at any of these emergency shelters. That's about the extent of the list that I've dealt with here. I suppose we can take questions at this point.
Yes, if there are any questions, then I'll just reiterate what the three of us have said from the beginning is it's communication. Communicate with your building official, communicate with your fire official. My knowledge of the different inspectors throughout the county are that they will be willing to work with you. Just need to communicate and let everybody know what's going on. That's the biggest thing when we're trying to set these up. Yes, we'll get business cards to put at the table.
Yeah, we'll send out all the contact information as well as all the handouts and everything. So everyone should be getting an email after this with all that information. Other questions? I'm going to bring over the mic. We are recording this. So part of what we send out to you is a link to this to bring back to your community so other people can view the training also.
Hi, thank you. I have kind of a two-part question. You mentioned the 24 square foot. Can you explain that measurements again? And then the second part of the question is, would that need to be included so you have each individual bed spaced out on the floor plan or the site plan that you're submitting to the building and fire?
So yes, in reality, we would like to have any floor plan that's provided to scale so that we can confirm what the space is. The 24 square feet just comes from what the requirements are of 6 foot head to toe with a 3-foot aisleway for people to walk and clearly access. And then the foot of spacing on each side from the cot. So that's where the 24 square feet comes from. It's just an easy figure instead of trying to pace out 6 feet and all around. If you can count your ceiling tiles and get your square footage, you can do a quick divide by 24, and that should be the general amount. You might get, one more or one less once you start, fitting everything out, but that's a general way to just get a good idea of what the occupancy load could be.
So there is.
So up on the screen there's a sample for it. And we can send that out too.
Yeah, just to elaborate on that, wow, that's loud. 18 of those 24 feet, rule of thumb is the cot itself. So, like the commissioner said, you allow 1 foot on the side to get in and out of the cot and 3 feet, more or less, to be part of these red aisleways for the exits. So it's just a rule of thumb, but we would expect to see a drawing like this provided for the building official and the fire official to make sure everything lays out the way it's anticipated to lay out. It doesn't have to be drawn up necessarily by an architect or anything. Any staff that can do diagrams can put that together and just kind of show how many beds will actually fit in the facility and make sure everybody has access to the exits.
And I'll just say on this, so this is for longer-term shelters, so these spaces here are not required. So you don't need medical, you don't need office spaces, all of that. It's really going to be this bed here, just the open space. So most of the areas that folks are looking at is just like an open room without all the office spaces and things for temporary. So it's usually just this part here around the layout.
Is there a case where fire watchers can take over the watch for a temporary non-functioning sprinkler system or during renovations? Can you just touch base on that? I think I know the answer. I just, for the sake of everybody else.
Ultimately, it will come down to your fire official. One of the other requirements I didn't mention is in order to get a CO, there can be no existing code violations in the building. And that's explicitly called out in the codes. So if there's ongoing construction in the building, again, talk to your fire official. My opinion would be the systems that are there have to be in service and they have to be compliant and functional.
Other questions?
Thank you. What about the use or the requirement of AEDs in shelters, and what are the regulations concerning the temporary part-time shelters or the long-term shelters, and is there a difference?
So that's where some of the exemptions come in. So for the short term, we're standing it up for a night or two. No, you don't. It's a good to have, but it is not a requirement, again, because it is short term and is not permanently in there. If we do go, if you are setting up one of the longer term shelters, then yes, we would ask you to put those in there. That's just part of, from our standpoint, that's just part of being on the safer. There are potentially some grant programs that could supply those if people are looking for them. But yes, for the short term, again, we have some exemptions. That's not something that would be required. But for the longer term ones, yes, we would want to see those in there.
We have location. If we have a location that is below ground, we have stairs that are used for exits on all sides. Is there an exemption for that?
So actually, there's a nice table in the building code that actually speaks to the different levels that shelters are on.
and there has to be direct access to grade, like Nick just mentioned, but you need to have a sprinkler system with those particular spaces.
The requirement for sprinklers, is that generally needed above ground and below ground?
That is specifically required for the below ground facilities. Again, it depends what type of facility you're standing up. There are exemptions for houses of worship. There are exemptions, like the commissioner was saying, if this is like a 48-hour kind of an emergency operation, you might not be required to have the sprinklers. But if it's a regular emergency shelter facility that's seasonal, you might be required to have the sprinkler protection. And certainly anything that's below grade would require that.
The questions? All right. So before I have Brian come up, thank you for that. And so all of the towns are a little bit different in their size. My experience has been in some of the towns. So there was one town that I was in, and one of the police officers. So please let your police department know as well that this is happening, because when you talk about the AEDs and things, usually they're the ones who are going to be responding, and they need to know that it's open. We had so the police officer, he went to the congregation. He said, "Father, are you willing to do this?" And he said I'd be open to it. He called the police chief. The police chief came down in 10 minutes, and they were able to get some of the answers, the questions answered right then and there. So you all don't have to be the experts on everything that they were talking about. You all have a fire person, you have somebody in the building code. So really being able to just reach out to those folks if you have the site, and do that early. So just like Captain Bull had said, just you don't want to be at the point where it's 20 degrees out or less, or it's negative temperatures, and then you're trying to open it. So I really recommend, don't try to be the expert on this. Let them in your town be the experts on it, and really let you know what you need to do. So I think that's the key thing. So on the checklist, the only thing that we're listing is some of the basics. Call your building inspector, call your fire inspector, call the police department to make sure that you have those folks on board ahead of time. Is that accurate?
Try to get as far ahead of it as possible. Again, you've heard it a couple times already. Try to plan ahead as much as possible and make sure you're meeting all the requirements before it's the last minute.
And I think a lot of the towns still have volunteer departments, so the fire watch would be a little bit more difficult just around having, because somebody would have to volunteer to do that overnight, but that's something to ask the fire department. And it's always better to have your first responders aware of this too. So there's usually a team of folks that respond to things, and it's usually volunteer. And so what does that look like? And so they know as well, so that they're familiar with what's happening. All right. Other questions? All right, I'm going to let Brian come on up and talk about the operations, introduce himself.
How you doing? Thank you. Should I sit down or does it matter? There we go. How you guys doing? My name is Brian Marvey. A little bit about me. For the last 2 years, well, this be the third year. 2 years I've been running the overflow shelter for Worcester, emergency overflow shelter. Even the drawing you saw was the R&V last year. So I'm looking at this from two lenses, because we are actually operating seasonally every year. So we have all the medical storage and all those things. So I like to try to downgrade it when we're looking into the different communities that might be a little bit small operation. As you say, 48 hours, maybe a 2-day, 3-day thing. First things first, starting off with staffing. I think that's the main thing you're looking at. We would love if you can try to find a way to get a male, female staff always on board. That way it gives an even breakdown depending on what's going on in the shelter. There's always a population of male, female in there, and there's different things that come up. You would love for a female to be able to attend to it versus a male. As far as numbers, again, operating from a bigger shelter, we're looking at the last 2 years, it was 60 plus inside the R&V. Dropped down this year to 36, But for me, if I'm looking at it in a smaller setting, I would love a ratio of like a 1 to 5, 1 to 10 on the high side if it was really that serious, if you had too many people. But no matter what, we're not having one person in the building. We need to have multiple. I would love an ideal of 3. To me, that makes sense. That way, if something's happened, 2 people can be attentive. The other person could be on emergency calls or whatever it is, responding to somebody. As you saw in the listing, there were shift leads, someone that you can appoint that is the main person of contact for whatever's going on at that shift, whether that be the first shift, 7 to 3 shift. You have a shift lead that is the contact person for whatever manager might needs to be involved of any escalating issue, something happened on floor. They're able to document the incident report, and they're able to articulate it to the manager, whoever it might need escalated again. You would love on-floor staff to handle whatever it might come up, because there's everything that comes up, whether it's I need tissue, I need this, I need that. You want to have hands-on. Now, I know it might be difficult working with volunteers and things like that, but the more hands-on deck, the better. You also get a good community vibe. The people that are coming in to get the shelter are also trying to make it work, so they will willing to help out. But you want to have a structure in place that your staff already know, so that way it's kind of set in stone. We know what we're doing. I think that would be very key when it comes to staffing. Overnight staff, usually it is difficult to staff it, but you definitely don't want to have one person on by themselves. There's a lot of issues that happen overnight sometimes. You want to make sure eyes are up, you can monitor bodies, make sure people are breathing. That's the goal, to keep people safe, alive overnight, so we can get to the next day. I think those are some of the key things that when it comes to staffing, that we want to make sure you have coverage all throughout. If you're operating all day into the overnight, again, ideally it would be 3 staff each shift. If you can get 4 or 5, it would be amazing. As far as like supplies, just starting off, you're gonna need med kits, gloves, Narcan, trash bags, forks, spoons. These are little things that I'm thinking of right now, just because whether it's you guys have snacks, noodles, you guys have a prepared meal for some of these folks, depending on what the situations are. You want to have these things on hand. They always fall short of your mind in the moment, and then when you don't have no forks, everybody's looking for a fork for some reason. Just sanitation wise, if you're a luxury, you're able to get some Clorox things, cleaning products. There's spills all the time. People also coming in from out on the street. It would be great if you can have some, just things that they can use, hygiene products. These are all supplies that you would love to keep aware of, because in that moment, if you can get those donations and have them on hand, when people gathered, everybody has a need for something different. So those little things that we know, we tend to forget, the common things that we have in our house that we can grab. You assume that they're at these places that we might be occupying for overnights for emergency shelter, like a mop bucket, or towels to wipe up a mess. These little things are key for operating a shelter, because in the moment you have to get creative when you don't have anything and it gets tough. And I've been in those situations. I worked overnight, I run the shelter, so I know the creativity that happens, and God bless the staff, they do a great job, but sometimes it's difficult. You're dealing with so much. When I say bathroom incidences, cuts, anything. So spilled kits, urine kits, blood kits, if you can get access to those things. These are things you want to be aware of. Now, is these everyday things? No. But for me, I'd rather be safe than sorry. Have these things ahead of time. You'll be fine, in my opinion. Storage, again, you're dealing with people that have their life, whether in their hand, back bag, 2 bags. You would love to come up with a system when you're calling these people to come inside for the night, to be able to say you can store their stuff safely. You want to be able to document it, so that way when we're tracking, we know where their stuffs are. Again, I've been through the problem of waking up the next day, coming into work, and it's a mess. Staff grabbed people things, came in for the night, put it somewhere, labeled it somebody else's name. And it's a bad thing, because again, this is people's livelihood that they're holding on to. And for me to say, I don't know, it's unacceptable in my opinion. So I think that's another key thing you would love to make sure there's some type of storage system that you can at least put these people's stuff aside, or let them keep it with them. So that way they know that they can have their stuff and they feel safe when they're coming in there. Security, a part of that as well. Being able to make sure that we're searching those bags. We don't want it to be, it's not a jail, obviously, but again, we have to keep the safety of the other individuals. A lot of individuals coming off the street sometimes tend to have weapons. Do I expect them to use them in the shelter? No, but I would rather us be able to have some type of system where we're checking them before they come in. We know they don't have any extra things on them that we can either get discarded, or we can put into a lockbox if you guys are able to access that, or some type of safety room that you can lock away and say, hey, you guys can get these things when you leave. Again, this is a different lifestyle that some of these people live. It might not seem like something that you would want to carry every day, but some of these people have things that they feel protected with when they're out in the street. And understanding that has nothing to do with you in that moment, because we're here to help the need at the time, which is the emergency shelter. So for me, again, I've seen everything that people have on them, and again, it's theirs. I'm not here to take it away from you. I'm not here to stop you from having that. I would like you to understand I'm here to keep it safeguarded. When we keep it here, I have staff here watching it. When you're ready to leave, you can have the same belongings. So again, that tracking system is another key thing that we want to make sure that we give opportunity and opportunity for. Medication storage, that is something, again, people tend to forget. A lot of people are carrying their meds with them, whether that be in a bag, socks, shoes, boxes. They put it in anything and everything. They carry it in it all type of way. Us as a shelter, we have our rule where we have to have a prescription bottle, different things like that. But again, I've seen everything when it comes to the emergency shelter that I've done overnights at, where people have it in bring it in and it's a bag full of pills. Now, in that moment, obviously, as emergency shelter, I think there's rules that they were allowing people to kind of continue to keep their meds. We're just taking that again, storing it, labeling it, making sure that it's safe. So when they're ready to leave, they got it. We don't administer meds or anything like that at our program. We're not MAP certified. Hours of operation, obviously, like I said, during the day, you're looking at having the staff there. You want to make sure your defined times are there. Morning time schedule, when people are waking up, we know exactly what time we're waking up, whether that be 6 o'clock wake up time, giving people about 30 minutes to kind of adjust to the wake up. Everybody's morning's different. We don't want it to be a drill sergeant, get up. Again, we want to give some type of people humanity. Everybody's not even sleeping sometimes at night, and now you got a warm bed. I'm not waking up right away in the morning just because you're yelling. So, some people might not even be able to sleep that night. They're in a group of people, might not even feel safe, so it might be tough. So again, in the morning time, giving that grace, also understanding that we do have a process to get out of here because we have to get on and move on with the day, but having a set time in the morning so that way the clients know what it is, what they're looking at, so that when we get up and we are putting our foot down and say, okay, this is it, we're done, we have to move forward, they know that. Why? Because we also have to be on time if you guys have cots, mats, whatever process of being able for them to have to sleep, you have to have time for the staff to be able to break that down, put it away. That is a task regardless, whether that's the volunteers or the staff. Sometimes even the clients help out. I love it when they help out. Again, this is a community is what I say. Let's work together so that way we can do this again. But yes, those time frames are very key. Moving on to breakfast, you want to be able to shift from cleaning up your stuff right into breakfast. Why? Because people are still sleeping / having stuff out. It's very difficult to serve, keep it clean and smooth and aligned. So you want to be able to transition to those things. I think those defined times of being able to have our cot breakdown, breakfast, departure. If we're coming in for the evening time, we have a set curfew on when these people are coming in, so everybody in the community knows. Obviously, there should be an open window for the stragglers that are going to come in. This is an emergency shelter, so there's still a process for those people to come in. But a good curfew allows for you to be able to kind of steer line what is happening with how many clients you're having, documenting everybody and knowing what's going on, so that way you can kind of get ahead of it before it's just a random people coming in and out, and you have staff that are attending to something in the building. So it's very key for that, to make sure those things are there. Let me see. Operations inside the shelter as far as overnight, again, keeping those people inside or throughout the day. They're obviously going to want their smoke breaks in some kind of manner, setting those smoke breaks ahead of time, so that people feel they're not locked away inside a building. I know it's key for safety to keep people inside the building, so we need to have these times defined. I have a hard time. I don't have a hard time. I'm a nice guy, so for me, when I'm on overnights, and again, I've been inside a lot of programs, worked a lot of places, so for me, dealing with someone with trauma and telling me they need a cigarette, I don't mind going out with them and smoking a cigarette, depending on who's in the building. If we have enough staff, I've been the luxury of being able to do that extra. But for me, again, I also know the dangers of that when I'm not there, and sometimes staff are allowing people to have a smoke breaks, other things happen. So again, we want to put a set time frame in throughout the day, then a cutoff time of those smoke breaks, so that way people know it's time for bed. This is what we're going forward to. Again, those transitions of people knowing and understanding is very key on keeping things smooth and understanding across the board versus people choosing whenever to do things. As staff, you can only do so much. You don't want to be stressed thin on trying to accommodate everybody. it's great to be able to, but we want to be smart about that. Yep. With that, I'll pull it closer to me. There we go. Let me look at that. Safety issues. I mean, again, talking about making sure we have Narcan on hand. Any issues, we are escalating 911. We know the proper calls we need to make, like they discussed. Shift lead are our key contact people that are reporting to managers, making sure that they know what happened. They're documenting everything. These are very key for operational. You want to have a paper trail regardless. Even, again, if it's an emergency shelter and a 2-night thing, someone that has a behavior issue this night, again, we're not punishing them forever. It comes the next time you guys open it in 2 weeks. At least we have an understanding of this person's behavior. Maybe we're able to find some type of outreach help for this person, whatever it is that they're dealing with. Because again, you can't perpetuate the behaviors. It turns into a problem for everybody over there. So I'll try to think of a lot of things that might jump out in the operations. Again, we run it every day, so to me, every day is a new issue. But you want to just try to get a lot of these things set in stone. Once you have those operations, kind of those ground rules, it's kind of you're working off of those, because again, everything every day is a little bit different, is what I would say. But again, it's a fun time. You're dealing with a great population, a lot of people that have beautiful stories. For me, that's the best part of the job. When you're working with somebody and you actually get the conversation with them and hear their story, it takes it. I mean, all the other nonsense is out the window, because again, you get to learn about people, and I think we do a great job of being able to help people. So this would be good if we're able to figure out how it works in your town. We can reach out to us. I ramble as I do. Like I say, I'm willing to talk. However I can help, I think it's very key that we can put these things in and people feel comfortable on being able to open these shelters, because it's needed regardless. So yeah, any questions?
For the overnight volunteers, what's your ratio of volunteers to guests?
So at our I mean, we're operating a 40 people shelter in a sense, 36. So we have one shift lead, 2 staff on board no matter what. Now in a smaller situation, we're looking at maybe 10 to 15 people. In my feeling, I would love for it to be 2 people at least at the minimum. But again, 3 is ideal. You would love 2 people on floor, extra staff as the emergency person contact or whatever, depending, like I said, if we're in a basement type situation, like I heard before, can a staff be upstairs to kind of direct emergency responders to where to go? That is another key thing that I've seen that happen at the shelters, where they're looking how to get in and we're not able to be outside because we're dealing with something inside. A fight breaks out. These are things that happen sometimes. 2 people, it's okay. But for me, ideally, overnight staff, I would love it for 3 people on shift. It makes me feel comfortable as a manager. That way I know I can call. Someone should be able to pick up, versus when I call and 2 people on shift, you can't, they're working, they're doing something, or they're active. Someone might need something from the bathroom while this person's attending to this person. It gets difficult when you're stretched. So for me, overnight shift, depending on the population, again, how many people you have, I think ideally 3 would be a great number to kind of sit on. It's good. For our, we pay our employees. So our organization works in it every day. So yeah, so we pay. Yeah, she can answer. Yes.
11 to 7 is very difficult.
Yes.
So most folks, it's not a shift that folks are normally awake. So what we try to do is 4-hour shifts. So if someone can be there from 11 to 3 and then 3 to 7, it seems to work out a little bit better, so that folks aren't committing to a full 8 hours. But you can overlap that however it works for folks. And so it's really just around making sure at a minimum there's 2 people in case one person's dealing with something that's happening and somebody else needs something. And again, the first responders. But yeah, the 11 to 7 can be difficult. And so what we try to do is figure out who are the folks that can cover that shift ahead of time, because things come up, right? So, someone might be away, they might have plans that following day. So thinking about probably 4 or 5 people that can do those shifts and the different times, so that you have a few people to go to, because you also want to be prepared for someone not being able to come in, right? It's flu season. I'll just use that one as an example. Someone might get sick.
100%.
So just thinking about that too, about how many folks you have. And I think it's about, so yes, we're trying to prevent folks from being in extreme cold, but we also have to make sure it's safe. And that's where making sure that there's enough folks there. And if there's not enough staff, is to really be weighing that too, is to make sure that we're keeping folks safe.
I think, as she echoed that, asking early. There are people out there that are willing to do overnights. It's part of their schedule. It's part of my schedule. I do it. I fit it in however I can. I like to do that. But I think being ahead of time, if you guys are planning early, letting people know these are some of the shifts we're looking for. I feel like there are people that will sign up because they know there's a need. Now, when you ask normally, people tend to think it's a daytime thing that you might need them for, but if you put it out there and make sure it's known we're looking for this coverage ahead of time, I think you can avoid that issue, because it is something difficult. Like I said, it's not normal, but being able to break it down into those 4-hour windows as well can really help out a lot.
Can you have one person on the shift? I believe it's
So he's asking if you can have one person on a shift.
It's not a no, in my opinion. Obviously, you guys want to work how you guys can work, but realistically, I think ideally it's key to have 2 people. You know your population. If we're in a different town, I think, again, I've been on outreach in other towns and just working with the police department and as well as their outreach teams, I've seen that they're very aware of who their population is. The population knows them well. For me, in a situation like that, I don't know, I'm outreach work out. If I was there, I wouldn't mind I would understand being in a shelter, maybe with 6 or 7 of the outreach population in that town. I wouldn't feel nervous or worried, but there are things that can come up that it's difficult for one person to manage, even with 7 people. Now, I'm assuming I'm being naive and nice and great. I think everybody's supposed to help me out and we're all going to work together. But again, things come up. Some people are not here to help. They're worried about their own thing. So again, for us, planning wise, we want to be smart. It would be ideal for us to have 2 people. Again, 3 the greatest, 2 perfect, 1 if we have to, because we're still doing something that's needed.
And I also would say that talk to your local police department. So a lot of the police departments will help with it. The risk that, and they'll always say that, is that if they're on a call, though, they're not going to be able to respond. But a lot of times the police departments in the towns will be really helpful too.
Leah, could you speak to how much support there is in the COC agencies to help satellite communities that are only volunteer or new to this experience? What kind of scaffold?
So I would say that we can do a lot of work with folks around how to set it up. So we don't always have staff available for the overnight hours. So we can send it out to our groups. It's volunteer for most of our folks to do that. So what we'll do is we'll send out, if there's something that's opening, we can send it out to our volunteers. We can send it out to our groups to say, this is going to be opening. Is there someone that can do this? And I'll say that for the 11 to 7 shift, there's some folks that are night people and some people that are morning people. I prefer to do the 3 to 7. Ron did the 11 to 3 shift. So it's just around folks' preference too, but it gives folks that the ability to not feel like they have to stay up all night.
But for example, like St. John's does the overflow shelter right now, and SMOC's in there, which is really helpful. Would other satellite communities that are of volunteers have SMOC support or some other agency for that necessary expertise that they bring?
You mean on-site overnight or just in general? Right. So there's that, and I'll let Smock answer that question. I don't know if Vaughn or Brian wants to talk about the St. John's.
The St. John. Well, again, we've accepted being able to do the St. John shelter, but right now, currently, from what my understanding, I know we're paying our staff. There's a difference in paying your staff and the volunteers. Totally understandable. For us, obviously, we've talked about being able to set up even our own people that might be willing to volunteer to help out for some of these situations. But again, just changing that mindset from our staff to understanding that it is a volunteer thing and you're going to another town. We have to put that out there. We haven't set that up yet, but I think that is something we could look into because we are willing to work with all the other communities to try to help out with this. But I know it's difficult, again, regardless of staffing. Even at St. John's, us being able to do that, even paying them, it's still hard to still sometimes fully, because we're still staffing our other shelters as well. So again, I think these are things that we can also discuss with our higher ups. I think even putting in just asking people for volunteers, a part of our organization that are known to help out, I think that could be key as well. So yeah, we're open to a lot of things.
So I will say with that too, so the state each fall issues an RFP for emergency winter shelter. So if this is something you're thinking about for going into next year, I would talk to a provider, whether it's SMOC or others, saying, hey, this is what we're looking for. As part of your RFP response, can you add 10 days to X community? And they can plan that into their response to get those dollars into your community too. So that might be another strategy to have that professional staff help you out too.
And I appreciate that, Jim, because I think for this year, what we're thinking is that those contracts are already set.
Yes.
They usually come out in November, which is why we're saying to reach out to try to do this during the summertime. So that we know the communities that are looking to do this. And Leah, I think the issue would really be around, if you all, you can reach out to us. So if you're planning on opening, we can always sit down and have a conversation and see what we can do. But it's going to be harder if it's not something that's planned in for future.
I was just wondering, for houses of worship where it's new to them,
Yes, well, I think being comfortable in what you're offering will be very key. Regardless, you're still helping, but being able to manage it first, being able to see it firsthand, what you're doing, you'll see it. And that first incident, you're going to learn a lot out of it. But I would agree that if you can manage the number, you wouldn't want to take on too much that you can't handle in the sense of it being your first time. Again, we want to help as many people as possible, but you want to be safe. We want to make sure we're safe in the building. Again, anything can happen, so it'll be smart to make sure your numbers are controllable. That's what I would call it. I wouldn't say limit, because again, we want to help as many people as possible, but I would definitely say for your own safety, as far as the clients as well, to be able to provide proper care, we want to be able to have a number that you guys can actually handle and control.
come in, that's something that
I don't. I don't want communities thinking again that that's the main target. We do that because that's part of our normal operations. We run a big shelter at Queen Street. We run our shelter at MLK. So it's part of our normal operations. We kind of brought it into what we're doing at St. John's as well. I also do believe that when we do WAN, there is such a safety that comes from other clients as well. A lot of the clients, we're in a big city, Worcester. A lot of clients know each other. Some have their issues with each other, however it may be. That wanding sometimes of making sure that people don't have anything might be the safest thing for one of the ladies that come and tell me, hey, I don't, this conversations I've had, I'm not sure about this person. Could you keep an eye on them? So for me, in my mind, it might seem like we're doing a good thing by making sure we're doing at least preventative measures for whatever might happen. Anything can happen. People can hide things anywhere, but us being able to warn and kind of just give that sense of, hey, we're making sure this place is safe, as well as verbally talking to them. We would love for you guys to pass in your weapons. This is a place that we're not having them in here. I think that goes a long way with some people. But I think that the wanding action actually helps other people's as well, whether it's they say it or not. You know what I mean? So, yes.
So I'm going to pause us for questions right now, just because Dr. Broach is here and he has a short period of time. But I will so for the number of people, just keep in mind that it's a tight-knit community. Once you're open, people will tell each other. So you have to be prepared that even if you want 5, that you could, if there's 10 folks in your community, they're going to show up. And I don't know that there's a volunteer out there that can say no when it's negative degrees and someone's standing at the door. So just keeping that in mind. And I think we've done it both ways. We've done it where we've wanted folks and we've done it where we haven't. And so it's really a community preference or the building's preference, mostly because most of the time you all know in the smaller towns who they are. They're usually residents that you know. And so it's different when you have folks that are coming in that you're not familiar with. And if it's a smaller shelter, it's a lot easier to do it as well without. If you don't have a wand, I wouldn't say that's a deal breaker. If you have one and that makes you all feel more comfortable, then yes, you should do that. I've never had an issue with not having folks come in and not wanting them. So it's just usually they're pretty respectful. They're just really grateful. And in the morning, some of them are a little grumpy, but some of us are grumpy in the morning too. So don't take that to heart. They are grateful. We're asking them to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning sometimes. So, all right, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Broach. So he's from UMass. He's going to do he's going to talk to you a little bit about PPE.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me. Can everybody hear me okay with the mic? Okay. I tend not to necessarily project my voice that well, so if I trail off, let me know. But what I wanted to do is, was asked to do is just to talk a little bit about appropriate PPE and infection control for emergency shelters. I'm an emergency doc at UMass, so I come to this from the lens of sort of what we do in the hospital and what we've done in other settings like the medical respite shelter as well as the field hospital. So some of this is geared towards sort of a higher level sort of medical environment, but hopefully between some of the guidance here and your own situations, that some of it will be useful and kind of applicable to your situation. So and feel free to just interrupt me if you have any questions or if things come up that don't make sense or don't seem to fit. So basically, some of the things I want to talk about are hand hygiene, PPE, respiratory protection. Get over here so I can see my slides. And then cleanup and exposures for staff. Again, everybody's going to have their own specific protocols and exact, different types of PPE and things like that. But hopefully some of this information would be useful for the volunteers themselves if you want to use some of the pictures or the diagrams in the slides for them, and for you as planners to sort of figure out how to put some of these measures in place to keep everybody safe. So if we go to the next one. So hand hygiene is probably like the most important thing. So, if I had to like pick one thing that everybody would do at their shelter or basically anywhere, this would be the thing. Things I emphasize are that using alcohol or other sort of commercially available hand sanitizers and having that stuff just everywhere that you can, available to everyone in the shelter, is probably like the frontline first best thing to do to keep all the patients or the clients safe, as well as the staff safe. So setting up those stations, having that stuff available, and encouraging people to use it is super important. That's not always possible to have that many of those stations set up and things like that. So hand washing is the other perfectly acceptable alternative to that, and just making sure that people have access to soap and water and a sink and, that type of hand hygiene. Sounds simple, sounds obvious, and it kind of is, I guess, but having that available and just like putting out more stations, more places to wash your hands than you think might even be necessary. So it's like kind of always a top of mind for folks to be doing that is I think super important. I also want to emphasize that even if you're wearing gloves, washing your hands afterwards is super important. And we'll talk a little bit about PPE donning and doffing. And sometimes it's easy to contaminate your hands, especially when you're taking off PPE. So after people have fully taken off whatever PPE they're wearing, to wash their hands anyway, or use hand sanitizer anyway, even if they're wearing gloves when they were doing whatever they were doing, contact with a patient, contact with the patient's belongings, etc. So this is like a full hospital get out of PPE. I imagine that this is probably not going to be available at every shelter everywhere, which is fine. I would say, prioritizing wearing gloves is the most important thing. Hands obviously touch a lot of stuff. Then they touch people's faces. They touch yourself. So making sure that we have at least gloves available for everybody that's working in the shelter is super, super important. Making sure that they're the right size gloves, making sure you have a variety. Again, sounds obvious, but that's one of those things that it's pretty cheap, pretty easy, and doable, I think, in most cases. Having masks, even just surgical masks, not only for staff, but for patients if they'll wear them. And a lot of that is too keeping the volunteers safe, but also reducing that risk of transmission of flu and COVID and all those viruses throughout the shelter population, so that everybody doesn't end up getting sick, right? And then if the only time I would really say it's super important to at least consider having some type of gown or barrier for clothing and eye protection is if people are going to be doing cleanup of spills, if there's body fluid. Those would be times when you definitely want to as fully protect people as possible. Certainly, if I were working in a shelter, I wouldn't be walking around with a gown and gloves and a hat and all that stuff all the time. But, if I'm cleaning up like a big spill or cleaning up somebody's soiled linens or something, obviously having that stuff available to make sure that you can protect to some extent is a good idea. So this is basically what I would say it would be the perfect world to have at the shelter. Gloves, a gown, and a mask. Obviously not like that. That's kind of weird and hospital-y. But like I said, the best you can do with what your population is and the tasks you're going to be asking your volunteers or your staff to do. N95 mask, this always comes up. So like, does it need to be an N95 mask, or can it be like just a regular surgical mask? Regular surgical mask is going to be fine for most stuff, but if people have access to an N95, that's going to help protect them more additionally against COVID and flu and other respiratory viruses. So useful, but at least having some form of respiratory protection is a good idea, and pretty easy and cheap to do for most places. All right, so this is just a couple of quick things about PPE, how to take it off. This is really important. Everything from just keeping your hands clean to, with a lot of pathogens, we see that the time when people are most at risk to expose themselves is actually when they're taking off the dirty PPE that they have on. And so taking it off the right way and training your volunteers to take it off the right way is super helpful to try to make sure that people stay safe. These are really common sense basic things, so forgive me, but basically what you want to try to do is never touch the exposed surface of whatever that PPE is. And the way you do that, especially with gloves, is just to use sort of the interior of the glove to kind of pull it off of your hand inside out, and then not touch the dirty glove with the clean hand, right? So you're sort of taking it off in a way that allows you to not have to touch the exterior, dirty, exposed surface of the glove. Surprisingly, just telling people this is not something that, unless you work in a clinical setting or wear gloves a lot, is not something that people are necessarily familiar with. So even though it sounds kind of obvious to not touch the dirty stuff, it can be helpful just to remind people that this is like the appropriate way to take off gloves. We go to the next slide. And then if people are wearing gowns, again, this is one of those things that may not come up a lot, and I obviously don't expect that all shelters are going to be fully like, everybody in gowns all the time. But if you are wearing one, taking it off away from your body and especially not pulling it up over your head is something that people often will do. And then obviously, it's like you've got a full like of wearing the gown in the first place. So just reminding people that like you want to sort of take it or bio situation it's going to be deposited in is really helpful. The other thing is to take off stuff near your face last, because you want to have clean hands when you're taking off your mask, your eye protection, and things like that. So this is just sort of a recommended order for putting stuff on and taking it off. Again, the main thing here is just that you want to take off that mask last because you want to be clean, and your hands want to be clean when you're doing anything around your face. So seems really complicated to just say a simple thing, which is try not to touch your face with bloody gloves, which probably is obvious to most people. In terms of decontamination, it depends a lot on what your specific shelter is going to have and have available for cleaning supplies. There are all kinds of different commercially available wipes. This is similar to what we use in the hospital. These are easily available by just Amazon purchase. You can also use bleach solutions or anything else that you sort of make. The advantage of these commercially available ones is that they all have specific recommendations on what's on their quote unquote kill list of the viruses that they take care of. Some are active against things like influenza and COVID, where others are not. Most now are. So most of the things you'd buy in a store are kind of like active against most of those things. But in this, like if I had to ask people to remember one thing, it would be that when you use the wipe, and this we're guilty of all the time in the emergency department, is like somebody comes in, wipes everything down, and then immediately puts another patient or immediately puts another set of linens on stuff. These things only work if you allow them a certain amount of wet time, meaning that the stuff has to be in contact with the viruses for a certain period of time. Usually it's a minute, sometimes it's up to 3 minutes, but it says on the bottle. And if you like wipe it off before that, it doesn't kill the viruses or the bacteria. So leaving that dedicated minute or 2 minutes of quote unquote wet time to allow the stuff to work is really important, and in a way that you can sort of totally invalidate everything you've done by just sort of like wiping it on and wiping it back off. But that's in your plan. So decon is another challenging piece, is what to do with all that stuff. Like obviously, things that are not heavily contaminated, just usual people's trash and things, are just trash. things that are contaminated with body fluids really should be disposed of in a special like red bag and handled separately to the extent that you can. That is going to be different based on what town you're in, what sort of support you have from your infection control or Department of Public Works or whoever's handling that trash for you. But these biohazard bags really are supposed to be handled by someone who's dealing with regulated medical waste. So that's something to sort of put in the plan or think about in terms of who's going to do that function. Again, not everything has to go in these, but if it's you're cleaning up a spill or somebody threw up on the floor or bled on the floor, like you don't want that stuff mixed in with the sort of general trash going out. So that's a point of planning that's important to deal with. And then the other kind of, I think, second to last thing I just wanted to go over quickly was that there will be times when people get exposed to body fluids, and then knowing what your response is going to be for the volunteer or the employee who is exposed to somebody's body fluid, and having a good sense of like what their plan is going to be for post-exposure prophylaxis, for testing. Obviously, it depends a lot on who the volunteer is and what your town's plan is, and kind of all of those internal things that you're developing as you're standing up a shelter. But I would say that a couple of things that I always try to make clear to people who I see in the emergency room who have been exposed to body fluids is that first is that the risk of transmitting a disease in this way, especially if you're just sort of cleaning up stuff, is pretty low. Truthfully, it's not zero. So we do a bunch of stuff to try to make sure people are safe and have the right treatment after an exposure just to make sure. But people, and myself included, get really freaked out when they get exposed. And so having that support there, understanding that people are going to be really scared if this happens, and trying to make sure that you have good guidance for them. That guidance would include things like, number one, if you're exposed, just wash the exposed area for a long period of time, like 5 or 10 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but if you're standing at the sink for literally 10 minutes washing your hands, it feels excessive, but that's the right thing to do. I put this in. Obviously, you should wash with soap and water unless it's your eyes or your mouth. Please don't tell people to wash their eyes with soap, but just rinse them really well. And then let the supervisor, however the structure works at your facility, and encourage those folks to actually go and seek medical attention, whether it's in the emergency department or their regular doctor, to make sure that they get any kind of testing that might be applicable if they've been exposed to, for example, hepatitis C or HIV, and that they have access to post-exposure prophylaxis meds like antiviral medicines if they do happen to get a significant body exposure with blood or another contaminated fluid. And having that kind of worked out in advance, because there's a time limit on when you're exposed and when those things work. And so if you spend the first like 2 days trying to figure out who the right person is to go to, you're sort of already down the road of this exposure being a lot bigger of a deal than it should have been. One easy answer I'll always say is just send them to the emergency room, and the emergency room can deal with that type of exposure. But people may have other plans, and that's fine. Just they should go somewhere to make sure that they're getting the right treatment. And then limiting exposure for everyone. So this goes back to, making sure that there, to the extent possible, that there are masks available, that we encourage folks who are staying at the shelter as well as volunteers to wear masks so that they don't expose each other, they don't expose staff. Obviously, I don't think anybody's in the business of forcing anybody to do things, but encouraging them to the extent possible to try to protect themselves and to protect others is obviously super important. Next. Is that it? Okay. Yeah. So I know that was pretty quick, but happy to take any questions. Also, my email, I can either give it here or should be available. If people want to reach out, I can connect you with other resources, either at the hospital or other places. And I'm happy to, answer questions or be emailed or whatever along the way, as well as things are getting set up. So yeah, I guess I'll stop there. Any questions right now? Sir. Oh, yeah.
Just procedures in cases where folks get poked by a needle. What's that look like? I know it happens a lot more than often. So.
Yes. Oh, wow. This is serious microphone. So I think if people get stuck by a needle, that would be the sort of highest risk type of exposure, especially if the needle's used. but it would be sort of the same procedure as if they were exposed in any other way. So another common one is people get stuff splashed in their eyes if they're cleaning stuff up, and or splashed in the mouth, or somebody in the ER spits in your mouth, or whatever, like, gross ways that you can get exposed. But I would say that the right thing to do would be to make sure that the exposed person just washes it really thoroughly, and then having kind of set up in advance what your plan is going to be for what happens to those folks. It may well be, hey, go to the local emergency department, they can draw your blood, that kind of stuff. One of the things that either a town department of public health or you as the staff member could do that would be really helpful is organized testing of the patient who exposed the staff member. So it's really helpful if they will consent to have the patient themselves, like the shelter resident who might have had that needle and caused the exposure by having that needle around, get tested themselves, because that really helps us understand whether the exposed person is at risk for HIV, obviously, or hepatitis C, or one of those things. So, it's in some ways is like very local, because it depends on what your local environment is and what relationship you have with the emergency department, or how you want to put those in place. But I would definitely say that the easy button is just to send them to the ER, because they'll know what to do and can draw the blood and that kind of stuff.
And for a variety of reasons, that's the reason we don't recommend anybody pat somebody down. It's not just for needles, but it's also because it's really invasive for folks. So, but that's also a risk for folks if they were patting someone down. And then I'd also say we've been seeing a lot more diabetics. And so folks, the needles with diabetics. And so that's where just being really careful about trash and picking up folks' belongings, making sure you have the gloves on. You can get the anti-stick gloves as well, if you really wanted, if that was something that you wanted for the shelter. But it's I think it's more about prevention for that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
For volunteers who might certainly need the advice to go to an ED after an exposure, they'll incur a $150 copay. So is there a workaround that we can think about or recommend to not have that be the mitigating factor in terms of accessing protection?
Yeah, it's a great question. So another potential option would be if they have a good relationship with a primary care doc that they could go see, that's also fine. It's really somebody to kind of draw the blood and make sure that if they need post-exposure prophylaxis, somebody can prescribe it. And that is definitely the downside of the ED also. Like, waiting around in the ED forever is not super fun for folks, but certainly $100 to $150 copay is not a trivial thing for folks. And I get that. It's one of those where you want to try to make it as least painful as possible for the person, but still encourage them that they go to see someone, because there is that sort of 3-day window, 72-hour window when they need to be started on medications if they are exposed enough to need them.
So the public health department is not an option.
I guess it would depend on the public health department in your location. They may be able to organize blood testing and things. That would be the only, and it depends. I don't know the sort of structure of your public health department, but if that public health department has a doc who can order the labs and write the meds, then totally fine. But if it's like a public health nurse that's doing more surveillance epidemiology, they may not have that capability. So, but it's a great question to ask ahead of time so that you can avoid that. Yeah.
And we'll add that to the checklist, because we already say contact your Board of Health. So make sure when you talk about the Board of Health to talk about a prevention plan, and also what happens if someone does get exposed. Cable services.
My name's Scott Armstrong. I'm District Chief of Prevention. Anytime like the shelter comes down, I work closely with the Building Commission and the captain here. We talked about volunteers. We can go out there, we can get you the biggest space, we can get you the safest space, but if you don't have the support structure in place, volunteers, staff there to also make the place safe, it's kind of worthless. If you only have one person that night and you have a gymnasium, if that person got stuck, who's coming in? Oh, can you not hear?
It's on. Just keep it.
Sorry, I thought I was loud enough, but safety. You always have to, it kind of hit a nerve when you told me one person that night. We have a lot of experience in the room. We know production. Third shift is normally the smallest shift. With safety, we need to switch it around. During the day, most fires happen, 2 o'clock in the morning, right? 3 o'clock in the morning. You have people, we always want to see the goodwill in people, but we have to plan for the worst. During the day, you have passersby going through by your shelter. People are driving every day. Everything's lit up. But at night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the city's asleep. One person there maintaining 30 people in the room. Some people haven't had a bed in months. They're sound asleep. We know some people have substance abuse. We PTSD. You go commotion over here, nobody's watching your back with one person. You need to staff to level of your people you're providing and the size and space. 3 people in a wheelchair, you have 1 staff, 2 staff, you need to account that. If you're on the 2nd floor and there's a fire alarm goes off in that system, that elevator's probably gone. It's probably locked out, now you have to get stairs. So kind of want that to be in the pre-planning. How many volunteers we get, how many people we're trying to service, and keep that in there. House of Worship came up. That's gonna be a gray area. Depending on the type of rooms they have there, if it's an old rectory, that's gonna be working with the building commissioner on that. That could pull in sprinklers, all that stuff. So I just want that out there. I know that could talked a couple times. But the big thing is support, staff. Fires happen 2 o'clock in the morning. People have cell phones. They're all coming in with cell phones. There's only so many outlets in there. They got these third-party cords. We're seeing all these ionized battery issues. They're all fighting for it. Third-party cord, there could be a fire right there. So little things we don't think about. We just got to be aware. We got to be conscious. We got to be moving around. Just sitting back here, there's a lot of information out there. I learned a lot today. Learned from you, learned from the commissioners here. I've been in this position for 2 years, and I'm always learning. And I'm always getting phone calls. I'm always researching, and you can reach out to me at any time, and I'm going to work with you because all we want is safety in the end. Anybody else?
And just quickly, so SMOC has also said that folks can come and observe at both St. John's. We can let you know when St. John's is open, and then also at one of their other shelters. So we can send that out to you all too. And so if you wanted to go to one of the shelters that's in operation, you can reach out to one of the SMOC staff. Yeah. Yeah, well, so I'm going to have Brian, but Brian can talk about restrooms and smoking facilities and all that too. So Brian's going to now talk about kind of that interaction around that. Thank you.
Just going to come over and grab my notes. All right. Thank you all for being here. This is super exciting to see this many folks in a room that are, interested in doing our best as a community to ensure that people don't die out there. You've had an opportunity to hear kind of all the nuts and bolts, all the ins and outs, the things you have to do, the things that are required. And now I get to be the person to really talk about the soft skills, talk about the connecting with people and the people that are going to be coming in. So my name is Brian Bickford. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I have about coming up on 20 years of experience working with homeless folks here in the community. Everything from being a behavioral health clinician, working directly with folks, an administrator, as well as working with a team currently of outreach workers, both working with people in encampments, but also working with people in shelter. And then most recently, having the opportunity to volunteer some of my time at St. John's this winter for kind of the emergency overflow shelter. The first thing I would say is relationships are key. You all know or have seen or know people who do know the people who are potentially going to be coming in. These are people in your community. You might not know them personally, but get to know these folks. Relationships will go a lot further than anything else that we could possibly put in place. I would say that you could have the Taj Mahal of shelters, but if you treat people like crap, they're not going to come. There's going to be more problems. There's going to be issues. They're going to be angry. People are going to be agitated. You really have to keep in mind that these are folks that are coming in because at this point in time, don't see that they have any better option in the entire world. So just think about that. This isn't a time for us to judge or for us to decide that this person should do this or this person needs to change this or this was a choice that someone made. These are folks who have, at this point in time, this is the only option. It's -2 degrees outside, and unless you open, this person is going to be staying outside. Now, people talk all the time about, oh, people choose to do this. Oh, people want to stay outside. I can guarantee you that if you've ever talked to anybody in a tent, when it's -2 degrees outside, if they had a better option, they would be there. Keep that in mind. That's just important for us to remember. This is a humanitarian mission that we are talking about right now. This isn't treatment. This isn't us trying to push people, force people, make people do things that you think is best in their life. This is solely an opportunity to ensure to the best of our abilities that people don't die because of the elements and not having the things that they need. The other thing, when we're thinking about that being our premise, that being our starting place, the reason that oftentimes people don't think that they have other options is because the systems that are in place don't work for those individuals, one reason or another. So they won't go to a shelter because of X. Traumatic events in people's lives, oftentimes. Mental illness, substance dependence, all of these sorts of things. Fear of what's going to happen, experiences that people have had. So keep that in mind as people, the options that are out there, the systems that we have in place are not working. This is the safety net of the safety net that we're talking about here. So what we need is folks need a low barrier access point. And what that means really is we need to ensure that we have minimal restrictions on who and what is allowed to, I say what in terms of not the people, that's the who, the what people can bring in, what we're requiring of people, what we're asking people, how we engage with those people when they walk in. Safety of volunteers, safety of you all, paramount. Absolutely. I'll be the first one to say that. That being said, this is where those relationships come in. This is where how you engage with someone when they walk in. And these are the things that you all are going to have to figure out as a community, as a shelter yourself. Are you going to wand? Are you going to pat people down? Myself, in my experience, I would rather have a conversation with someone. I think that sets up a very different dynamic than someone walking through the door and you saying, hold on, I need to do X, Y, and Z. Hold up, I need to wand. If you decide to wand for safety reasons, absolutely. But just make sure you have those conversations and people know what to expect. My typical go-to would be, hey, this is an emergency shelter. Welcome. My name is Brian. Always introduce yourselves. All of those sorts of things. But having a conversation with someone, hey, in order to make sure that you're safe and other people are safe, I have to ask everyone, do you have any weapons on you? I know a lot of people, you're living outside, you might have a pocket knife or something. I'm asking everyone who comes through the door if you have some sort of weapon on you. We can lock those up and give that back to you in the morning whenever you're leaving, but we just want to do our best to make sure everybody's safe. I'm not pushing anybody on anything, but you're having a conversation. You're respecting people's autonomy. I think going along with that, that is the compassion and respect that we need to have for people, regardless of how they show up. Regardless of this person, you're going to have people that are going to show up intoxicated. Is that something that is a trigger for you, or is something that is hard for you to deal with? Is that a frustration that you might have? Maybe so. This isn't the time, again, to pass judgment. This is a time to make sure that people are safe. Keep in mind, oftentimes people who are under the influence of substances are much more likely to die of hypothermia. We know these sorts of things, and these are the folks and the things that we need to be thinking about when we are opening these shelters. I like to tell people or think about things in the way of dead people don't recover. We all want to see people get better. We all want to see people recover. But if someone's not alive because we don't allow them in, because they're under the influence, because they're having a psychotic episode, because they're talking to themselves, whatever that may be, they're not going to have the opportunity when things are better, when it's not -2 degrees, and we can allow them, we can support them in taking whatever steps it is that they see necessary in order to make some change in their life, whatever that looks like. Not what we want, what they want. I would say that knowing and learning some of your local resources is really important, but don't force those on people. Don't make the assumption on both sides. Don't make the assumption that people don't know the local resources, because a lot of people do. But again, those resources aren't working for those people. They're the experts on their lives. They know what works for them and not. Know those. And so don't assume and just give people information that they're not asking for. We're not pushing other resources and that sort of thing on people. But also don't assume that people know all of the resources. I think something that you all are probably seeing, and if you're not, it is definitely happening across the country, is that there are a lot of elderly folks, older folks who are homeless for the first time, that are living in cars and whatnot, who don't know the systems, don't utilize the systems, fear of the systems, or whatever it is. Those folks might not know. And so to simply ask, hey, are there, I have some resources if you're interested. Is there something that I can help support you with? Let that person make the decision for themselves, what they need. I think operating with safety and structure, Brian definitely touched on this, but the thing that I wanted to kind of just reiterate is how do we go about doing some of these things? So again, this is your community needs to make a decision, or your shelter needs to make a decision about what things look like. What time do we open? What time do we close? What time is lights out? What time is wake up? And what time do we need to have people out of the facility? Letting people know that, even, I would say, even having it printed, having a schedule, not in a everything has to be black and white. Clearly, there is a lot of gray in here, but keeping in mind that people do better with some level of structure and knowing what's going to happen. Thinking about what do checks look like. Are we doing 15-minute checks? Are we doing 5-minute checks on the bathroom? If someone's in the bathroom for too long, what do we do? How do we respond to that? I think it's really important. I have been part of things where people, you're scared, you don't know, you forgot to do a check, and people start banging on a bathroom door. Or someone else needs to use the bathroom. This is something that happens quite often, is that there's another guest that needs to use the bathroom, and they need to go really bad, and they need the bathroom right now, and they're banging on the door. Well, the person on the inside typically does not respond well to that, and now you have a conflict. So, you see somebody, somebody's in the bathroom, you see somebody going to the bathroom, intervene. You say, oh, let me just check. Let me check on this. Let me knock on the door. Let me make sure. Hey, we have somebody else that I'm just checking on you. You've been in here a little while. We have someone else that needs to use the bathroom. Can you hurry it along? Or whatever, however you want to do that. But the authoritative, hey, you need to get the hell out of the bathroom, isn't going to go very far and isn't going to go well. I would say, smoking is another thing. Oftentimes we need to keep in mind that people are in a room full of other folks. They could be agitated, they could be anxious, they could be nervous, they could be angry, they could be all of these sorts of things. Somebody's snoring too loud, which is quite often. Somebody wakes up and somebody's like, shut the hell up, and we're trying to calm things down. And this is one of those gray times. If you have a handful of people, do you need smoking breaks? Probably not. Would it be helpful even if you do have smoking breaks? Somebody needs to go outside and cool off, whether that be smoking or not. Somebody needs to go outside and cool off. Okay, yes, you have 5 minutes, but I need you to quietly leave and be quiet when you come back in. That's also a good opportunity if you have enough staff to walk outside and have a chat with somebody, just to humanize this experience and humanize, a relationship right there with people. I think wake up is another thing that is always very touchy and just important to really talk a little bit about. This is where I think it's really important. When you let people know, hey, we need people to be out of here by 7 a.m. We're going to start waking people up at 6:30, but we need to be out by 7 a.m. What we're going to do is at 6:30, we're going to quietly come around and we're going to let people know. Are you somebody who sleeps really hard? If you are, and if you have a small number of people there, this is where it's really important and it's really, really helpful to personalize things as much as possible. Know who's like, hey, when you have this conversation, are you grumpy in the morning? I am. I hate when people wake me up. How can we wake you up? What can we do best? This is what we would like to do. Is it okay if I touch your shoulder? Ask somebody that, because whatever you do, never touch anyone, ever, in any situation without their permission, but especially while someone is sleeping. We're going to say, all right, we're going to turn the lights up. We're going to turn this light on over here. And we're going to slowly turn the lights on. We're going to slowly start to wake people up. If you're not awake, how could we best go about making sure you're awake? We need everybody up by 6:45. That's going to give you 15 minutes to get out, to be out of the facility. Whatever it is you decide. Do you want to give people an hour? Do you want to give people 30 minutes? I think it's really important to also keep in mind that when you have people leaving, you're opening most likely because it's really cold outside. in the morning, it's going to be really cold outside, and you're going to be sending people back into most likely the coldest or close to the coldest point of the day. So keep that in mind. Do you want to stay open a little bit later? Do you have that flexibility? Great. If not, what is open? Can you provide muffins? Can you provide some sort of hand warmers, gloves, socks? Those are the sorts of things. Socks, underwear, hand warmers, gloves, hats. Those things go a really long way. And to be able to give someone something on the way out, again, is going to help them to have a positive remembrance of, even if things weren't all great, they still care. They opened, and on the way out, they said, this is what, here's some sort of object. Here's something that you might need. Give people that opportunity. If you can wait until 9 a.m. and it's not a weekend and people hang out at the community center, the library, whatever. Sorry, librarians. I know that gets to be a touchy issue sometimes, but some place that people can go, that's a good thing. If you can provide transportation, great. That's awesome. The last thing that I am going to say, because I could keep rambling and do this forever, but I want to give you all an opportunity, and we're coming up on time, is I think it's really important, and it's been touched on, know who your first responders are. Know who, and I would say if you're opening, make sure you're having a conversation with your community to let people know. So if there are an issue, oftentimes your first responders, whether it be the police or fire or EMTs or whatever that is, they're going to have relationships with a lot of the folks that we're talking about. They're going to know these folks. So if things start to escalate or there becomes a problem, know who you're going to call. Have people stop by. If they're working an overnight shift and they know this, I know that a lot of the folks that we serve have struggles with authority figures, have maybe not had the best experiences with authority figures. Running an emergency overnight shelter, I think, is important to know that you have support and for people to see that you have support from the community. It has been helpful. We do have a police officer here in the city that has a relationship with a lot of folks that are homeless. Having his presence, just not even being in the shelter, just being out in his car, has been helpful at times. So just keep that in mind and make sure that people know when you are open, so that you have, and hey, who do I call? Make sure you have that information. Hey, is Steve the lead person for the volunteer fire department in your town for the night? Yes, make sure you know who Steve is and Steve knows that you're open. Also, if you say that you're going to be open, make sure that you're open. If you make a decision that you are going to open every day that it's below 20 degrees, people will remember that and people will know that. And people will come from across town to get to a safe place. And if you're not open because you didn't have the volunteers or fill in the blank, people are going to remember that. And think about, again, this is a humanitarian mission. This is a humanitarian effort. And that puts people at risk. If people are expecting, they have their mindset, they do everything they can to get all the way there. Now they are there with potentially nothing, no life-sustaining gear, things that they need, and now they have to find their way back. So I will end with a quote that I think that everybody really, I had two quotes. So I'm gonna finish with one. I think given kind of the history of this country that we live in, I think this is important and timely. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Does anybody have any questions?
So just quickly, because I know some folks might need to leave at 11. So a few things to remember for cleanup. Make sure the cots are disinfected. And that means going back to what Dr. Broach had said about making sure you understand the dry time and the wet time. So you have to read the label of whatever you're using, making sure that you know what that is. The blankets need to be washed. If you have blankets that you're providing for folks, and they need to be washed every night that they're there. And if there's something, if you have to store either the mats or the cots, just have a place to store them. If it's only one night, but you might be open again later, just have a place to store the cots too. So I just wanted to mention that. Just want to make sure before we move on to questions. I'm sure folks have questions, and I'm sure some of us can stay after 11 too.
When it's 2 degrees below zero and you've got somebody that's walking in the door and you want to protect them, you want to protect the volunteers. If you know or have a good feeling that they have a weapon and you ask about weapons and wanding or touching them, but they don't want to allow you to do that, and things are starting to get out of control, do you have a process that you have in place to give to your volunteers to help them decide when you call a first responder or the police?
So, I would say that there is a broad spectrum of what you feel comfortable with, what your volunteers feel comfortable with, what the congregation, if it's at a house of worship, what the owner of the facility wants to do. I can tell you how I would handle that situation, but as someone who has 20 years working with homeless individuals in encampments, what I feel comfortable with and how I deal with things is probably going to be very different than what your threshold or some other people's thresholds might be. Safety, of course, is paramount. Do the vast majority of people, probably in this room, but also that are homeless, have something that could be used as a weapon on them right now? Absolutely. Do I believe that if I ask someone that they are going to be completely honest and truthful with me and give me the pocket knife that they have, but keep the pin that they could use in the same way? I don't know. I don't know that. And so that's something that I think as a group and as volunteers, that's why I think the relationship piece is so important. But I think as a group, you have to make a decision on what that looks like. Am I gonna set up a dynamic where I'm gonna push to, if I think that someone has a weapon, that I'm gonna push them to give that to me? I don't feel comfortable doing that. I don't think that sets up a dynamic that is helpful. I would say, the vast majority of instances of violence with homeless people are, one, violence towards each other, or violence perpetuated upon a homeless person as opposed to the other way around. That being said, do we want to plan for the worst? And has it happened? Absolutely. So I can't give you like a black and white answer. I think that you have to figure out what your threshold is, and whatever that threshold is, follow through with. Again, if that means that you decide that you're going to call the police if X, Y, or Z happens, then you need to continue. You need to let people know that, and you need to follow through with that when it does happen. So I really think it's a comfort level thing is the way I would answer, the way I would.
Because you don't want to push it back out.
Of course. You don't, but at the same time, there are times that we do have to ask people to leave for legitimate reasons, right? Even though we don't want to. But if someone is doing something that is, a serious safety concern or safety issue, then we have to do what we have to do to keep each other safe, to keep the other residents or the other guests there safe. So this is, I say low barrier, low threshold, but that doesn't mean that we don't have rules and that we just allow people to have a free-for-all there, because that's a disaster just waiting to happen.
And before we take a couple more questions, I should also mention, so we've been running St. John's. There's a group of us that really have been working on that. Smock's really taking the lead. We still debrief every week. It doesn't always go perfect, right? So don't expect that you're not going to run into issues. It's just a matter of figuring out what to do in that moment, and then figuring out what do we need to do differently next time. And we find an issue every time we meet, and we've been meeting probably 4 or 5 times now. It doesn't take long, but it's really just for us to figure out, what are some of the things that we can make it go smoother. The other thing that I'll say when folks are leaving, the things that we've seen that folks really need, just so if you're looking for volunteers to be able to give supplies, emergency blankets because they're small and compact, hand warmers, socks, and something to carry their belongings in. A lot of times they have a plastic bag and it rips or it breaks, and just something that they can carry. Backpacks are best, but not everybody has the backpacks, but something they can have their belongings in. Did I miss anything? No. Okay. I don't want to. I want you all to just hear that it's very hard when it's still cold out to make people go outside. Just be prepared for that. Just know that that's going to be there. Folks are not going to want to. They're going to take their time to go outdoors. Can't blame them for that. But it's a really hard thing for a lot of folks to now say, okay, it's overnight. We need to use this facility for something else at 8 o'clock in the morning. So now you need to go back outside, and it's still 6 degrees. Other questions?
The wonderful checklist that you're putting together, Leah and others, will that be a cloud-based one that can be updated as we kind of work collaboratively to think about considerations that might not be self-evident to all of us?
So the question was the checklist, will that be cloud-based and available to be updated in an ongoing way as people start utilizing it?
Yeah, potentially we can make it cloud-based. I think as we kind of collaborate here, we could do that. But we'll have this initial checklist. And just as a reminder too, if you didn't sign up ahead of time, we just have a pad of paper here. If you can just put your name and email address. Again, we're going to be emailing out all the information today. So no problem if you didn't sign up ahead of time. Just please come and put your name and email, and we'll get everything to everyone.
Thanks. I think we're pausing because cloud-based sometimes can get a little complicated with security issues. So we'll figure out if we can figure out how to do that. And again, all the materials that you saw today, we have a checklist. We've been adding to it as we went through today based on the questions. That will be sent out to everybody whose email we have here. I really appreciate you all being here. We know that homelessness is on the rise. Really appreciate that folks want to do things in their own communities. Most of our folks that become homeless don't want to leave their own community. The fastest rising population we're seeing right now are seniors who just can't afford rent, and they're living in their vehicles in the town that they have lived in for probably 30 or 40 years. So really appreciate all the support. And I have cards here too. We're going to send out the contact information to everyone for those that you can reach out to. This is part of our community effort to make sure that we keep folks safe when it's really cold. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for coming today. If you are interested in potentially coming over and viewing a site and kind of seeing how the operations, just come on up here. We can get your information and talk to SMOC or other providers.
St. John's is open.
And yeah, our temporary shelter, St. John's, will be opening tomorrow night, so that might be a good opportunity. Thank you all.